She's in surgery right now, the nurse whispered. And they're at a party? That's what I heard as they wheeled me into the operating room. While my chest was about to be opened, my children were clinking champagne glasses for my son-in-law's promotion. I came out of anesthesia to see a photo of my daughter, mid-laugh under confetti, time-stamped right as the doctor was working on my heart. But the worst part, when I got home, the locks had been changed. No one told me. No one was coming. They didn't just skip my surgery. They erased me. But I kept the ledgers, every receipt, every signature. And while they toasted to their new house, I froze the accounts they used to buy it. They chose the promotion party over my life. So I chose something better than revenge. You won't believe how I made them pay. My name is Evelyn Whitaker, and I'm 75 years old. After 40 years of double shifts at the hospital, I've settled into a quiet routine in the home I finally paid off last spring. My daughter Regina and my son David, both successful professionals now, bring their families for Sunday dinners. Though lately, their eyes linger more on my china cabinet than my face. The kitchen still smells of cinnamon and clean soap, just as it did when my late husband Tom would read his evening paper while I balanced our checkbook. My sister-in-law Martha, who spent 30 years as a paralegal, helped me organize every receipt and document into labeled folders last month. My rocking chair by the window creaks with the evening breeze, a sound that reminds me, some things can't be calculated in dollars. But let me start from the beginning. Dr. Patel's office always reminded me of a library, all hushed voices and measured movements. That Thursday morning I sat across from him, my hands folded in my lap while he studied my test results. The ticking wall clock seemed louder than usual, or maybe that was just my nerves making everything sharper. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, looking up from the papers, "these numbers aren't what we hoped for. The blockage has progressed significantly." He pointed to something on the chart that might as well have been written in Sanskrit. "We need to schedule surgery, and I mean right away. Next Wednesday at the latest." My throat went dry. "That soon?" "I don't like to alarm my patients unnecessarily," he said, leaning forward. "But in this case, waiting would be dangerous. We have an opening next Wednesday morning at 8. I've already contacted the surgical team. You know that moment when the world seems to tilt sideways? This was mine. I thought of Tom, how quickly he'd gone after his heart attack. We'd had no warning then, but here I was getting a chance he never had. "Of course," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Wednesday it is." Back in my car, I pulled out my phone and hit the speaker button, then dialed Regina first, adding David to the call. The familiar rings echoed through the car's interior while I sat in the hospital parking lot. "Mom?" Regina answered, the clatter of her office in the background. "I'm actually heading into a meeting." "This is important, sweetheart." I waited until David's voice joined the line. "I've just come from Dr. Patel. I need surgery, heart surgery, next Wednesday morning." The silence that followed made my stomach clench. You ever notice how silence can be louder than any shout? "Wednesday?" Regina's voice had that tight quality it gets when she's stressed. "Mom, that's the night of Charles's promotion party. The CEO is flying in specially for it. We've been planning this for months." I pressed my fingers against the steering wheel. "I know it's not ideal timing, but Dr. Patel says it can't wait. I'll need help with the pre-op paperwork and—" My voice wavered slightly. "I'd really like you both there." "Mom," David cut in, his words careful and measured like he was explaining something to one of his kids. "This is a really big deal for Charles's career. The whole family's expected to be there. Maybe we could see about rescheduling the surgery? The doctor says it needs to be Wednesday." I repeated the date and time, spelling it out clearly. 8 a.m. Dr. Patel's concerned about waiting any longer. Regina sighed, that familiar sound that always preceded a compromise I wouldn't like. "Let me check with Charles about the final head count for the party. We'll figure something out, okay? Maybe we can split the difference somehow." "Right," David added. "We'll work it out. I've got a client calling. Can we talk about this later?" After we hung up, I sat there for a long moment, one hand pressed against my chest, where the hollow feeling had settled in. Remember when your children were small, And a kiss could fix any hurt? Funny how those days slip away without you noticing. I called the hospital's pre-op department, confirming my Wednesday arrival time. The nurse's voice was kind as she ran through the checklist of instructions. Back home, I packed a small overnight bag, the soft knit socks I'd made last winter, my insurance folder with its neat tabs and labels, a worn paperback I probably wouldn't read. Opening my calendar app to add the surgery details, I saw it right away. The banner Regina had added to our shared family calendar months ago. Charles's executive promotion celebration, it announced in cheerful blue letters, complete with party hat emojis. The banner stretched right across next Wednesday, like a bright line drawn through my heart. Wednesday morning arrived with a chill that seeped through my cardigan. The pre-op room buzzed with efficient movement. Nurses checking charts, machines beeping their steady rhythms. You'd think after 75 years I'd be used to hospitals, but there's something about those institutional corridors that makes you feel small. Mrs. Whitaker, a nurse with kind eyes and Elena on her badge, approached my bedside. We're ready to take you down now. I gripped my phone tighter, scanning the hallway one last time. The waiting room was visible through the doorway, just a few scattered people thumbing through old magazines. No Regina, no David. My chest tightened, and this time it wasn't from the heart condition. Remember how Tom used to say silence speaks louder than words? Well, empty chairs can speak volumes too. Your family running late? Elena asked as she adjusted my blanket, tucking it around my legs with practiced care. She'd noticed me looking, of course. Nurses always notice everything. They might be, I said, though the words felt hollow. Traffic, probably. Elena nodded, but I caught that flicker of sympathy in her eyes, the one medical staff reserved for patients alone in their moment of need. I'll make sure your phone stays right here within reach, she said, settling it on the rolling table. I've got the contact numbers you provided, and I'll text updates throughout the procedure. The ceiling lights slid past overhead as they wheeled me toward surgery. You ever notice how time seems to slow down when you're waiting for something that isn't going to happen? Each doorway we passed felt like another chance for running footsteps, for breathless apologies, for my children to choose differently. Counting backward from 10, the anesthesiologist said later, his voice floating somewhere above me. I made it to 7 before the world went soft around the edges. I came to in stages. First the antiseptic smell, then the muted beeping of monitors. Finally, the dim lights of the recovery room. My phone sat exactly where Elena had promised, its screen lighting up with notifications. My fingers felt clumsy as I reached for it. The first image stopped my breath shorter than any heart condition. Regina stood under a spray of confetti, champagne glass raised high, caught mid-laugh as she applauded. The timestamp burned into my vision. 9:47 a.m., right when Dr. Patel would have been working on my heart. More photos followed. David giving a toast, grandchildren in their party clothes, Charles accepting some crystal trophy thing while the CEO beamed beside him. The heart monitor picked up its pace. A nurse glanced over, but I waved her away with what I hoped was a reassuring smile. Everything okay, Mrs. Whitaker? Elena was back, clipboard in hand. Could I trouble you for some tea? My voice sounded thin, even to my own ears. Warm, if possible. Of course. She returned quickly with a paper cup, steam curling from the top. Careful. Now, small sips. Thank you, I whispered. But the words tasted like the tears I refused to shed. Crying wouldn't change anything, would it? My mother taught me that dignity matters most when it costs the most to keep it. When Elena stepped out, I pressed the call button. The reception desk answered, and I forced my voice to stay steady. Has anyone checked in asking for Evelyn Whitaker? Let me look. A pause, some typing. No, ma'am. No visitors registered under that name today. I lay back against the pillows, eyes fixed on the ceiling where 2 tiles didn't quite meet. Through the window, afternoon sun cast long shadows across my bed. When I'm discharged, I whispered to that crooked seam above me. I'll ask them to explain. There must be some explanation. The heart monitor kept its steady rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. counting out seconds that felt heavier than all my years combined. All set, Mrs. Whitaker? The discharge coordinator, Jenny, according to her badge, wheeled me toward the exit doors. Now remember, take it easy for the first few weeks. No heavy lifting, and follow up with Dr. Patel as scheduled. My hand drifted to the bandage beneath my cardigan. Funny how such a small incision could feel so heavy. I've got the instructions right here. I patted my purse where the paperwork nestled beside my wallet. The automatic doors whooshed open, letting in a gust of autumn air that smelled like fallen leaves and car exhaust. Remember when that combination meant school supplies and new sweaters for the kids? Now it just meant I was tired, sore, and heading home to an empty house. Would you like me to call someone to pick you up? Jenny asked, settling me into one of the waiting area chairs. No need, I smiled, already pulling up the rideshare app on my phone. I've got it covered. The driver arrived quickly, a young man in a sensible sedan who helped me with my overnight bag. As we pulled away from the curb, I typed in my address and started rehearsing what I'd say to Regina and David when I saw them. Something gentle but firm. I understand the party was important, but I needed you there. Or maybe, let's talk about how we can do better as a family. You know those moments when you're planning a conversation and your heart's already racing? That was me, watching familiar streets slide past my window. The car stopped at my house, the same red brick two-story where I'd raised my children, where Tom and I had grown old together until he passed. The hydrangeas I'd planted were still blooming by the front steps, but something looked different. That's when I noticed it, a sleek new keypad lock where my old deadbolt used to be. My stomach dropped. Everything okay, ma'am? The driver asked, helping me with my bag. Yes, thank you. I waved him off with what I hoped was a convincing smile. The keypad gleamed in the afternoon sun. Well, no problem. I'd used the same code for years, one that matched Regina's birthday. My fingers moved automatically. 0412. Red light. Denied. I tried David's birthday next. Another red light. My hands weren't quite steady as I pulled out my phone and dialed Regina's number. Straight to voicemail, her recorded voice cheerful. Hi, you've reached Regina Mitchell. Leave a message after the happy tone. David's phone rang but didn't answer. I knocked on the door, the sound echoing hollow inside. Mrs. Whitaker? I turned to see Mrs. Chen from across the street, watering her mums. Hello, Alice. I saw them installing new security yesterday, she said, frowning slightly. Is everything all right? Yesterday, while I was still in recovery, my chest felt tight, and it had nothing to do with the surgery. Just a minor mix-up, I managed. I'm sure they'll be home soon. Mrs. Chen nodded uncertainly and went back inside. I sank onto the bench beside my hydrangeas, the same bench where I used to read stories to Regina and David when they were small. My fingers found their way to the familiar planter where I'd always kept a spare key hidden under a loose brick. Empty. The incision in my chest throbbed. I pressed a hand against it, trying to steady my breathing the way the nurses had taught me. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Don't panic. Think. My wallet held a business card from the Comfort Inn near the hospital. They'd given it to me during pre-op planning, just in case. I'd tucked it away, never thinking I'd need it. Something white caught my eye under the welcome mat, a piece of paper, crisp and official looking. My hands shook as I lifted the mat and picked it up. The message was typed, not handwritten. Kindly coordinate access via David Mitchell. My son's name, so formal, so cold. I sat there on the bench, surgery bag at my feet, holding that note while autumn wind rustled through my hydrangeas. The flowers Tom had helped me plant 15 years ago, their blue heads nodding like they understood everything and could do nothing to help. I barely slept that night at the Comfort Inn. The sheets were stiff, the pillow too flat, and my mind wouldn't stop spinning. Ever try to rest when your whole world's tilting sideways? I kept checking my phone, hoping for a message that would make sense of everything. Dawn came creeping through thin curtains, and I was already dressed and waiting. I'd seen David's morning routine for years. He always checked the house before heading to his office. Sure enough, Just as the sun cleared the rooftops, his new Range Rover purred up the driveway. You know that moment when you see someone you love, but suddenly they look like a stranger? David stepped out in his tailored suit, coffee cup in hand, looking more like a bank executive than my son who used to collect baseball cards in shoeboxes. Mom? He stopped short when he saw me walking. Up. What are you doing here so early? I need my house key, David. I kept my voice steady. And we need to talk. He glanced at his watch. Look, I know this seems abrupt, but it's temporary. We're just implementing some measures to protect our joint assets while we align a few ventures. The way he said it, like he was giving a boardroom presentation instead of talking to his mother, made my stomach clench. I have medical bills to pay, I said. I need access to my accounts. Actually, he shifted his weight, took a sip of coffee. We've removed you from the liability-heavy accounts. It's more efficient this way. Regina and I can handle the paperwork. Removed me? The words felt like ice in my mouth. Those are my accounts, David. My name's been on them for 40 years. Mom, please understand. This is for the best. I watched him check his watch again and remembered how he used to time himself building Lego towers, trying to break his own records. Where had that little boy gone? I'll transfer what you need for expenses, he said, already turning toward his car. Just text me the amounts. After he drove off, I caught the bus to the public library. Miss Peterson, who'd known me since David and Regina were in story hour, let me borrow one of their laptops. My hands shook as I typed in my banking login. Access denied. I tried the password reset. A message popped up. Recovery link sent to registered email, R. Mitchella, Regina's email address. My daughter now controlled my password resets. Back at the motel, I pulled out my binder of statements, the one Tom always teased me about keeping. My meticulous Evelyn, he'd say, keeping records like the Library of Congress. Thank God I had. Page after page showed withdrawals labeled JV transfer. Joint venture? My retirement savings, my CD accounts, even the Christmas fund I'd been building for the grandkids, all of it moved without my knowledge. I texted both of them, "Please explain these transfers. Where is my money going?" Regina replied first, "You wouldn't understand, Mom. We're handling it." David's came seconds later, almost identical. "You wouldn't understand. Trust us." Remember those moments when clarity hits like a lightning bolt? When I started highlighting the transactions, adding up the numbers, my hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady as steel. The final balance stared back at me, a number so small it might as well have been zero. Not enough for next quarter's property taxes. Not enough for medications. Not enough for utilities or groceries or the 100 other things that keep a life running. I set down my highlighter and looked at my reflection in the motel mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't just a mother who'd been betrayed. She was a survivor who'd worked too hard and too long to let anyone, even her own children, steal her dignity. My late husband's voice echoed in my memory. The best revenge is good bookkeeping. Oh, Tom, you had no idea how right you were. The Continental Diner hadn't changed since the 70s. Same vinyl booths, same coffee-stained menus, same smell of bacon, grease, and maple syrup. Betty and Rose were already in our usual corner spot when I walked in, their faces pinched with worry. "Evelyn, honey," Betty patted the seat beside her. "We've been sick about you. First the surgery, and now—" She trailed off, clearly unsure how to describe my children's betrayal. Rose pushed a cup of coffee my way. "We ordered you the chicken soup. Hospital food's never enough." I slid into the booth, my chest still, tender from the surgery. The waitress brought over a steaming bowl, but I just stirred it, watching the noodles swirl. I keep thinking I'll wake up and this will all be some bizarre dream. "You need a lawyer," Rose said, direct as always. "Document everything, every penny they've taken, every text they've sent." I wouldn't even know where to start. My spoon clinked against the bowl. And honestly, the thought of facing them in court, My hand trembled enough that I had to set the spoon down. Betty squeezed my arm. "You're exhausted, dear. And they're counting on that. Remember when David broke his arm in 3rd grade?" I found myself saying. "I sat by his bed all night, just watching him breathe. The memory of his small face, trusting me to make everything better, made my throat tight." The diner's phone rang, and Mabel, the owner, called out, "Evelyn, it's for you. Martha?" I hadn't even known Martha had this number. Tom's sister had always been the practical one in the family, the one who could find order in chaos. Her voice came through clear and firm. "I just heard about the surgery and the locks." She paused. "Why didn't you call me?" "I didn't want to burden—" "Stop right there." The familiar no-nonsense tone almost made me smile. "I'm coming over. Where are you staying?" "The Parkview Motel, but Martha." "Room. Number?" 112, but I'll be there at 7 with my legal pad and scanner. We're going to sort this out. Before I could protest, she'd hung up. Betty and Rose exchanged knowing looks. "Martha's exactly who you need right now," Betty said. "That woman could organize the devil's tax returns." True to her word, at 7 sharp, Martha swept into my motel room like a general planning a campaign. She set down her briefcase, adjusted her reading glasses, and started laying out color-coded tabs across the small table. "First things first," she said, pulling out a portable scanner that looked like it belonged in a law office. "We need to gather every scrap of paper that proves what's yours. Receipts, policies, emails, anything that shows your ownership and their interference." "I have my records in the cedar chest." I gestured to the corner where I'd stacked my salvaged belongings. "I've kept everything since Tom died." "Good girl," Martha nodded approvingly. "Tom always said you could teach accountants about bookkeeping." We spread the folders out by year, my handwritten ledgers neat and precise. But when I tried to open the first one, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I had to sit down. "I don't know if I can do this, Martha." The words came out barely above a whisper. "They're my children." Martha set down her pen and looked at me over her glasses. "And you're their mother, who worked double shifts for 20 years to give them everything they have." She pulled out a yellow legal pad already labeled Week 1 Tasks in her crisp handwriting. "Now, I need your signature on these forms to request copies of your records. We'll start with the banks, then move on to property titles." She slid the pad across the table, and I stared at the blank line, waiting for my name. In that moment, I remembered something Tom used to say. Standing up for yourself isn't being mean, it's being honest. I picked up the pen. The next morning, Martha transformed my dining table into something between a war room and an accountant's office. You know those crime shows where they've got evidence spread across every surface? That was us, minus the yellow tape. "Let's start with the most recent statements," Martha said, firing up her scanner. The machine hummed to life, its blue light sweeping across page after page. I couldn't help but think of all those nights I'd sat at this very table, carefully logging every receipt, every bill paid. The familiar scent of coffee and morning toast felt oddly out of place now among all these legal papers. "Here," Martha tapped her pen against a column of numbers. "Every transfer labeled JV. That's their joint venture coding." "When did these start showing up?" I squinted at the dates. 3 months ago, right after David's birthday dinner. Martha drew a timeline on her legal pad, precise as a surgeon. "Tell me about any meetings where they discussed changing account access." "Well," the memory surfaced like a bad taste. "Sarah, my daughter, she came over for Sunday roast about 4 months back. Said she wanted to help simplify my paperwork." My fingers traced the edge of an old bank statement. She had all these forms ready. Said it would make everything easier. "Uh-huh," Martha wrote the date in thick red letters. "Did she explain what you were signing?" "She said it was just updated account access. For emergencies." The words felt hollow now. "You should have seen how she rushed through it, like she was afraid I'd actually read everything." Martha pulled out a thick legal reference book. "There are strict rules about modifying estate planning documents. And consumer protection laws about financial authority changes. She started marking passages with sticky tabs. They can't just take over accounts because they feel like it. Remember how I used to organize the kids' school permission slips in those clear plastic sheets? Well, we did the same thing now, but with bank statements and property deeds. Each document went into a fresh sleeve, then into a binder Martha labeled receipts and loopholes in her perfect handwriting. Every time you see joint venture mentioned, Martha instructed, handing me a pack of yellow sticky notes, mark it. We need to track how they shifted the money. I worked through contract after contract, my reading glasses slipping down my nose. The pile of marked documents grew steadily taller. You'd be amazed how many times they'd slipped that phrase in, like they were hoping I wouldn't notice. This is good, Martha murmured, scanning another page. Very good. Each of these gives us leverage. The morning light shifted across the table as we worked. I remembered how Tom used to say his sister could find a needle in a haystack, and then tell you where the hay came from and who sold it. Looking at her now, totally focused as she cross-referenced dates and account numbers, I understood what he meant. Around 11, Martha suddenly went still. She was studying a signature block on one of the transfer forms, her finger hovering over the line where I'd supposedly signed. "Evelyn," she said quietly, "come look at this." I leaned in. The signature looked like mine, at first glance. But Martha pointed to the way the E slanted. "You always write with a rightward tilt," she said. "Every single document we've reviewed shows that same pattern, except this one." She tapped the paper. "This signature slants left." The room seemed to go very quiet. I could hear the old kitchen clock ticking, the one that had kept time through 30 years of family meals. "Are you saying—" I couldn't finish the sentence. Martha's whisper was barely audible. "This isn't your normal cursive slant, Evelyn. Not even close." I stared at that signature, my heart doing something complicated in my chest. The morning sun caught the edge of the paper, and for a moment, all I could think about was how many times I'd signed my children's report cards, their field trip forms, their college applications, always with that same rightward tilt. Martha's fingers flew across her tablet, pulling up mortgage documents I'd signed years ago. "Technology's something else these days," she said, opening what she called a Lightbox app. "Used to need actual tracing paper for this. You know that feeling when you're about to learn something you can't unknow?" That's how my stomach felt as Martha laid my old signatures next to the recent ones. "Watch this," she said, sliding one image over the other on the screen. The signatures merged like ghosts passing through each other. Even with my old eyes, I could see it plain as day, where the lines matched up and where they didn't. "See these loops here?" Martha pointed to the curves of the E in Evelyn. "Your authentic signature maintains consistent pressure. The fake ones." She zoomed in closer. "The pressure points are all wrong, like someone trying too hard to copy your style." I gripped the edge of the table, remembering all those nights I'd spent at this same spot, signing permission slips while the kids did homework. The maple surface still had that small coffee stain from when Tom startled me one morning, saying he'd finally paid off our first car loan. "I've got someone who can verify this officially." Martha pulled out her phone and dialed. "Hey, Patricia, it's Martha Whitaker. Got a minute to look at some signatures?" Patricia, it turned out, was a notary with 30 years of experience. Martha switched to speaker and held up the tablet. "Sending you these overlays now," Martha said. "What jumps out at you?" Patricia's voice crackled through. "Oh, honey, these newer ones? Classic tracing tells. Look at the hesitation marks where the pen stopped and started. That's not natural flow." My chest got tight. The incision from my surgery seemed to throb in time with my pulse. "Focus on the M in particular," Patricia continued. "See that break in the middle? That's someone lifting the pen to reorient. A real signature is one fluid motion." Martha scribbled something on her legal pad. I watched her write "forged" in bold letters next to two of the most important amendments, the ones that had stripped my access to the family accounts. "How bad is this?" I managed to ask. My voice sounded far away, even to my own ears. How much damage could they have done? Martha set down her pen. Forged instruments can void any transaction they touched. We can challenge everything they've done with these fake signatures. She paused, then added, but timing is critical here. She flipped her desktop calendar to the next month and ran her finger along the dates. See this? She underlined a date in red. Quarterly filings. If we don't act before then, what happens? The words barely made it past my lips. Once those filings go through, the estate transfers become much harder to reverse. Legal ownership shifts permanently. Martha tapped the date again. We've got 3 weeks. 3 weeks. I stared at that red line on the calendar, thinking about all the time I'd spent building what I had. 30 years of double shifts at the hospital, careful budgeting at the grocery store, the pride I'd felt making that final mortgage payment. So if we miss that deadline, I couldn't finish the sentence. Everything you've worked for could end up permanently in their control, Martha confirmed. Legal, binding, and very difficult to challenge after the fact. The kitchen clock ticked in the silence. Through the window, I could see Mrs. Henderson next door watering her roses, the same roses she'd planted the year I moved in. Everything looked so normal out there, like the world hadn't just tilted sideways in here. I picked up one of the forged documents. The signature stared back at me, a twisted mirror of my own handwriting. My children had sat at this very table, planning this, practicing my signature until they got it close enough to fool a bank. 3 weeks, I repeated, that number settling like lead in my stomach. The calendar seemed to mock me now, each day a countdown to either saving or losing everything I'd built over a lifetime. Martha gathered the documents into neat piles. 3 weeks to stop the quarterly filings. After that, she let the sentence hang there, heavy with everything left unsaid. I woke up at 4:30 the next morning, my hand automatically finding its way to the healing scar on my chest. The motel room's darkness pressed in around me, and for a moment I couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came flooding back. The surgery, the locked doors, the forged signatures. You know that feeling when fear hits you so hard, it's like all the air gets sucked out of the room? That's what got me. My hands were shaking as I reached for the bedside lamp. I can't do this, I whispered to the empty room. I'm not strong enough. The words tasted bitter, like giving up. My chest ached, not just from the incision, but from somewhere deeper. Then my eyes landed on my old leather wallet sitting on the nightstand. I'd carried that thing for 30 years, stuffed with hospital ID cards from all those double shifts. Every pay stub, every overtime, hour, every holiday I'd worked instead of celebrated. It was all for building that nest egg, for securing my future, for making sure I'd never be a burden to anyone. The phone rang, making me jump. Martha's name lit up the screen. "Hope I didn't wake you," she said when I answered. I almost laughed. Sleep's not exactly my friend right now. Good, because we've got work to do. The familiar shuffle of papers came through the line. I've got our checklist ready. First up, injunction petitions. I grabbed the notepad from beside the bed. Walk me through it. We need your statement first. Everything about the hospital stay, when you discovered the locks changed, the timeline of finding those forged signatures. I'll type while you talk. For the next hour, I detailed every moment, every conversation, every betrayal. Martha's keyboard clicked steadily in the background. "Now for the affidavits," she said when we finished. "I'm sending a courier over with the papers. Every signature needs to be witnessed and photographed." By 7, I was sitting at the motel's small desk, signing document after document. The courier, a young woman with kind eyes, took pictures of each signature with her phone. "For the record," she explained. "Got the fireproof pouch?" Martha asked when I called back. "Right here." I patted the gray bag she'd given me yesterday. One by one, I slipped the originals inside, double-checking each seal. Good. I've got our filing slot with the clerk at 9 tomorrow morning. Martha paused. "And Evelyn?" I did some digging. Your kids have a meeting with that luxury real estate agent tomorrow afternoon. They're planning to put down a deposit. My stomach clenched. Using my money. Not for long. I've timed the account freeze to hit right before that meeting. Martha's voice had an edge of satisfaction. They won't know what hit them until they're sitting there with their checkbook out. I thought about all those Sunday dinners, all those birthday parties, all those Christmas mornings. How had we gotten here? When did my children start seeing me as a bank account instead of their mother? You still with me? Martha asked softly. Just remembering. I touched the scar again, a habit I couldn't seem to break. Sometimes I think about that rocking chair by my window, the one Tom and I bought when we first moved in. I used to sit there every evening watching the sunset, feeling so secure. We'll get you back there, Martha said firmly. Or somewhere better. I walked over to the motel room door and set the fireproof pouch beside it, ready for morning. My reflection caught in the mirror. Silver hair, messy from lack of sleep. That familiar determined set to my jaw that Tom used to tease me about. What if I'm not strong enough for tomorrow? I whispered, more to myself than to Martha. Remember what you told me when Tom died? About how you kept going to work the very next day? I nodded, forgetting she couldn't see me. Someone had to pay the mortgage. Exactly. You've always been stronger than you think. Get some rest, Evelyn. Tomorrow, we fight. I set the phone down and stared at that gray pouch by the door. Everything we'd gathered, every piece of evidence, every hope I had of reclaiming my life, all sealed up in one fireproof bag. Tomorrow would test not just my strength, but the strength of our plan. I touched the scar one last time, a reminder of everything I'd already survived. The sun wasn't even up when Martha's car pulled into the motel lot. I was already waiting outside with our evidence pouch and a travel mug of weak coffee from the lobby machine. Ready? She asked as I slid into the passenger seat. As I'll ever be. I clutched the pouch closer, feeling the weight of all those documents inside. Funny how your whole life can fit in something smaller than a shopping bag. The courthouse parking lot was nearly empty at this hour. Just a few early bird lawyers hurrying up the steps in pressed suits, briefcases swinging. Martha grabbed our rolling cart from the trunk. 3 binders, color-coded with tabs, plus backup copies of everything. Remember, she said as we walked through security, let me do the talking unless they specifically ask you something. I nodded, watching the guard x-ray our binders. The familiar smell of institutional cleaning products hit me as we entered the main hall. You know that courthouse smell? Like old wood and paper and anxiety all mixed. Together. We found the clerk's office and took our place in the short morning line. My heart was doing that flutter thing again. Not the medical kind, just pure nerves. Martha must have noticed because she gave my arm a quick squeeze. Next, called the clerk, a thin woman with reading glasses perched on her nose. Martha stepped forward with our first set of papers. Emergency injunction filing plus service instructions. She slid the documents across the counter like she'd done it 1,000 times before. The clerk picked up her stamp. Each decisive thunk made me flinch slightly. Official, final, no going back now. Service instructions? The clerk asked. Yes, Martha answered, producing another form. We have a process server waiting for confirmation. I signed where indicated, trying to keep my hand steady. The clerk added those to our file, then handed Martha a receipt with our case number. Back in the hallway, Martha was already texting the process server. He's parked near the bank, she whispered, just waiting for our green light. And the real estate appointment? Martha pulled up something on her phone. Public listing shows the signing scheduled for 2 p.m. at Capitol Title downtown. We're right on schedule. We found a little cafe across from the courthouse, the kind of place where lawyers probably cut deals over coffee. Martha ordered us both large cups and found a table near the window. Now we wait, she said, settling in with her phone positioned between us. I wrapped my hands around the paper cup, letting the warmth seep into my fingers. How long? Bank opens at 9. Server will be first in line. Martha checked her watch. About 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. I couldn't stop thinking about all those Sunday dinners, watching my children grow up across that old oak table. Had they been planning this even then? Calculating while I served pot roast and apple pie? Martha's phone buzzed. We both jumped. "Service acknowledged," she read. "Processing freeze now." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. So their accounts will be locked tighter than a drum by the time they try to buy that house. Martha took a sip of her coffee. "The freeze affects all connected accounts, joint ventures included." I pictured it. My son and daughter walking into that title office, probably dressed up, probably feeling pleased with themselves. The agent would be all smiles until the funds check came back. Then those smiles would fade. "What time is it?" I asked. Martha showed me her phone. 1:58 p.m. 2 minutes. After all these weeks of planning, it came down to 2 minutes. I thought about the look on their faces when they realized. Would they feel even a fraction of what I felt, standing alone outside my own front door after surgery? My phone lit up. The name Son flashed on the screen. Martha checked the time again. 2:07 p.m. exactly. I stared at that flashing name, at that exact moment when everything changed. When they finally understood that their mother wasn't as helpless as they'd thought. The phone kept ringing in my hand. I silenced the phone and slipped it into my cardigan pocket. The vibrations kept coming. First son, then daughter, then son again. You know that feeling when your hands are shaking, but your mind is perfectly clear? That was me, walking through those gleaming corporate doors with Martha. The lobby stretched out like something from a magazine, all steel and glass, and important people rushing past with badges swinging. A massive logo dominated the wall behind, the security desk, the same one I'd seen sparkling in those party photos while I lay in recovery. "Can I help you?" The guard looked up from his screen. "Yes," I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "We need to speak with compliance, please. It's regarding financial disclosures and ethics violations." Those were the magic words Martha had coached me on. The guard's expression shifted instantly from bored to alert. "One moment." He made a call, speaking quietly into his headset. "Officer Reyes will be down shortly. Please have a seat." We waited on sleek leather chairs that probably cost more than my monthly pension. I watched people stream through the turnstiles, wondering which ones had attended that party, raised those champagne glasses while I was under anesthesia. A woman in a charcoal suit approached us, her heels clicking purposefully on the marble floor. "I'm Officer Reyes. Would you follow me, please?" The elevator rode smooth as silk up to the compliance floor. Martha carried our evidence binder, the one we'd labeled in red. Executive Ethics Review. Officer Reyes led us to a conference room with a view of the city. "Now, what can I help you with today?" I placed my documentation on the table, starting with the notarized timeline. "This concerns your newly promoted executive and several financial irregularities that coincide with his advancement dates." Her eyebrows rose slightly as she scanned the first page. I laid out the account statements next, then the medical records. "These transfers," I continued, pointing to the highlighted sections, "were initiated during my emergency heart surgery. The same surgery your executive and his wife, my daughter, chose to skip in favor of his promotion party." Martha quietly opened the binder to the signature comparisons. "We've also documented several instances of suspected forgery on key financial instruments." Officer Reyes studied the overlaid signatures, her expression professional, but her eyes widening slightly at the obvious mismatches. She made notes in precise handwriting. "Mrs. Whitaker," she said, "this is quite detailed. I'll need to bring in HR and legal immediately. Would you be willing to wait?" I nodded, thinking of all those double shifts I'd worked, all those careful savings that had vanished with a few strokes of a copied signature. Officer Reyes escorted us to a smaller room. Still nice, but clearly meant for waiting. A clock ticked on the wall, each sound reminding me of the heart monitor in that hospital room. I could picture my son-in-law at his party now, champagne in hand, making that speech about climbing the corporate ladder while I lay unconscious. Did he mention family values in that speech? Corporate integrity? Martha squeezed my hand. "You're doing fine," she whispered. The door opened and a young assistant stepped in, slightly out of breath. "Officer Reyes asked me to check on you, and," she glanced at her tablet, "they need Mr. Harrison in HR immediately, right now actually." I watched her hurry out, presumably to deliver that summons. My son-in-law would be walking these halls right now, still riding the high of his frozen luxury home purchase, still thinking he was untouchable. The clock kept ticking. Would anything actually change? Would there finally be consequences for choosing ambition over basic human decency? Through the glass wall, I saw people moving with new urgency. A group of suits power-walked past our door, files clutched in their hands, heading toward HR. Through the waiting room's glass walls, I watched the corporate world spin into chaos. People darted between offices like disturbed ants, their whispered conversations carrying that unmistakable tone of damage control. You know the kind. I'd heard it plenty during my years in office work, usually right before someone important took a fall. "Mrs. Whitaker?" Officer Reyes appeared at our door. "Thank you for your patience. Our review is progressing, but you're free to leave if you'd like. We have your contact information." Martha gathered our binder while I smoothed my cardigan, the blue one I'd bought on clearance last spring. Funny how the mind catches on little details in big moments. The elevator dinged behind us. I turned just as the doors opened, and there he was, my son-in-law flanked by 2 security guards. His face had that peculiar shade people get when their world splits apart. Gone was the polished executive from those party photos. Now he just looked small. Remember those nature shows where they tag and release wild animals? That's exactly how security moved him through the lobby. Quick, professional, no room for drama. They steered him toward the front desk where a woman held out a manila envelope. "Your badge and building credentials, please, Mr. Harrison." His fingers trembled as he unclipped the badge, that shiny symbol of status he'd chosen over being at his mother-in-law's surgery. The plastic made a dull sound as it dropped into the envelope. My phone buzzed. A text from my daughter. "How dare you sabotage David's career after everything we've done for you?" I almost laughed. Everything they'd done for me, like changing my locks, draining my accounts, making me beg for access to my own home. Another notification popped up, this one from the bank. Transaction declined, insufficient funds, reference, property purchase agreement. So their luxury home deal had collapsed. All that maneuvering, all those joint ventures they'd built with my money, and now they couldn't even close on their dream house. My voicemail counter started climbing. "Mom, what the hell did you do? You have no idea what you've started. There will be consequences for this betrayal. You better call us back right now." I saved, each message, letting Martha guide me toward the exit while I forwarded them to our evidence folder. The threats would look lovely in our documentation, right next to those forged signatures. "Evelyn." Martha's hand found my shoulder. "We should go before they work up more steam. You've done what needed doing." She was right. The afternoon sun hit my face as we stepped outside, and for the first time since waking up alone in that hospital room, I could breathe, really breathe, like the weight of their betrayal had finally lifted from my chest. My phone vibrated again. I almost ignored it, but this one was different. A local real estate agent. "Good afternoon. The lakeside cottage you inquired about is available for viewing tomorrow at dawn. The morning light on the water is spectacular. Shall we confirm?" Martha peered at the message. "A cottage by the lake? That sounds promising." "It does, doesn't it?" I watched my son-in-law's car peel out of the parking garage, his world in pieces. "I think I'd like to see the sunrise over water." Dawn painted the lake in watercolor grays when I met Rachel, the real estate agent at the cottage. "You ever notice how early morning light has a way of making everything look new? Like the world's hitting reset?" "Mind the steps," Rachel said, leading me up weathered cedar planks. "They're sturdy, just a bit slick with dew." The cottage wasn't much, maybe half the size of my old place, but something about it felt right. Windows wrapped the front room, framing water views that stretched to a misty tree line. No McMansions in sight, no keeping up with the Joneses, just quiet and the occasional duck splash. The previous owner was a retired librarian, Rachel mentioned, unlocking the door. She kept everything immaculate, the roofs only, 5 years old, and the heating system. I let her voice fade while I stepped onto the porch. The boards had that solid feel of old-growth lumber, the kind that doesn't bow or complain under weight. Perfect for a rocking chair, I thought. Perfect for watching seasons change. Inside, morning light spilled across pine floors, worn smooth by years of careful living. The kitchen was narrow but practical, just enough counter space for rolling pie. Dough, just enough cabinet room for one person's dishes. A corner nook caught the earliest sun, ideal for morning coffee and crosswords. "What do you think?" Rachel asked, gesturing toward the lake view. I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app Martha had helped me set up in the new town. My recovered funds sat safely in the account, untouchable by anyone but me. "I think I'd like to make an offer." Rachel's eyebrows lifted. "The full asking price?" "Every penny." I thought of all those double shifts I'd worked, all those careful years of saving. "I've earned this." While Rachel called the seller, my other phone, the one with my children's numbers, buzzed with fresh messages. Their voices had shifted from threats to pleading. "Mom, please, the bank's asking questions. They're auditing everything. David's reputation is ruined. How could you do this to your own family?" I switched it off and slipped it into my purse. Some conversations aren't worth having anymore. By noon, I'd signed the deed and contacted a moving company. "Just one piece," I told them. "A rocking chair from my old house, solid oak, belonged to my husband." "The one by the window?" Martha asked when I called to update her. "Jack's favorite?" "That's the one." I could almost smell the lemon oil I'd used to polish it every spring. "They're picking it up tomorrow." "How are you holding up?" she asked. "The kids have been calling me too." "I'm done holding up," I said. "I'm moving forward." 2 days later, the movers eased Jack's chair onto my new porch. The delivery man paused before leaving. "Ma'am, my grandma had one just like it. Said a good rocking chair's better than therapy." I smiled, remembering all the nights Jack had rocked our babies in that chair. "Your grandma was a wise woman." Once they left, I settled into the familiar curves of oak and cane. The chair's honest creak matched the rhythm of small waves lapping the shore. My chest scar barely twinged anymore. Funny how healing works when you remove what's poisoning you. Martha texted updates through the afternoon. The bank had voided every unauthorized transaction. My children's joint ventures had collapsed. Their luxury home deal was dead. Their social circle buzzing with whispers about forged documents and failed ethics reviews. David's corporate disgrace had made the business papers. I set my phone aside and plugged in the electric kettle I'd bought at the hardware store. While water heated for tea, I watched sunlight comb ripples into the lake's surface. Each wave caught fire for a moment, then settled back to blue. The kettle clicked off. I poured hot water over a bag of Earl Grey and carried my mug to the porch. The chair welcomed me like an old friend as I rocked gently, feeling steady for the first time since that lonely hospital room. Across the water, a loon called its wavering song. I sipped my tea and thought about respect, how it can't be bought or demanded or manipulated into existence, how it's earned through a lifetime of honest choices, even when those choices hurt. My rocking chair creaked its agreement. Facing the lake like a sentinel, some things, I thought, are worth more than blood.